In the Texas Hill Country, a name is everything, and the name Miller has been a curse in my house for 3 generations. We don't cross their fences, and they don't cross ours. But when I found Bo Miller, the youngest of the rival clan, collapsed at my south gate in the middle of a torrential downpour, the feud died a quick death. His family didn't just disown him, they broke him and tossed him onto my land like he was nothing but trash. They thought I'd finish the job. They thought I'd hate him as much as they do. They were wrong. The second I felt his heart beating against my chest, the mission changed. He's not a rival anymore. He's mine to protect. Would you save your greatest enemy if you saw they were hurting? Or would you let the past stay in the past? Tell me in the comments. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of Texas storm that turns the dust into a swamp in minutes. I was out checking the south perimeter fence on my stallion, Maverick. The lightning was occasional, illuminating the jagged landscape in flashes of strobe light white. That's when I saw it, a bundle of blue and denim huddled against the rusted iron of my gate. At first, I thought it was a calf that had wandered off. But as Maverick drew closer, snorting in agitation, I saw the shock of messy dark hair and the pale, bruised skin. I slid off my horse, my boots sinking into the muck. It was Bo Miller. He was the golden boy of the Miller Ranch, or he used to be. Now his face was a map of purple and red swales. His shirt was torn, and he was shivering so hard I could hear his teeth rattling over the thunder. His family's truck tracks were still fresh in the mud on the other side of the fence. They had driven him to the edge of the world and pushed him off. "Bo," I growled, kneeling beside him. He flinched, his eyes fluttering open. One of them was swollen shut. When he saw me, he didn't scream, he didn't fight. He just let out a broken, jagged breath. "Colton," he whispered, his voice sounding like he'd been swallowing glass. "Just leave me, please." "Like hell I will," I snapped. I didn't care about the 60 years of blood feud between the Wests and the Millers. I didn't care that his father had sued mine into bankruptcy 10 years ago. All I saw was a man who had been abandoned by the people who were supposed to be his shield. I hooked my arms under his knees and back, lifting him. He weighed almost nothing. The alpha of the Miller Ranch had been starving his own son before he threw him out. As I swung him up onto Maverick's saddle and climbed on behind him, Bo leaned back into my chest, his head falling onto my shoulder. "Why?" he choked out. "Because I'm a West," I said, kicking Maverick into a gallop toward the main house, "and we don't leave wounded things to die in the dirt." The ranch house was silent except for the crackle of the hearth. I had stripped Bo out of his soaked, muddy clothes and wrapped him in my heaviest wool blankets. He was sitting on the rug in front of the fire, a mug of bone broth in his shaking hands. I sat in my leather armchair, watching him. I was a big man, broad-shouldered, calloused, and hardened by the sun. Seeing him so small in my living room felt strange. It felt right. "What happened, Bo?" I asked, my voice softer than I usually allowed. He stared into the flames. "My father found the letters, the ones from the guy I was seeing in Austin. He called it a sickness. He said a Miller man is a pillar of the community, not a... well, you can imagine the words he used." I felt a slow, hot simmer of rage begin to boil in my gut. I wasn't a man of many words, but I knew what it meant to be a man, and beating your son for who he loved wasn't on the list. "He gathered the hands," Bo continued, his voice trembling. "He made them watch while he beat the devil out of me. Then he told me I was disowned, said I wasn't his blood anymore. He drove me to your gate because he knew you hated us. He thought you'd finish me off for him." I stood up, the floorboards groaning under my weight. I walked over and knelt beside him, forcing him to look at me. "Your father is a coward, Bo, and he's a fool. He threw away the best thing his family ever had." Bo's eyes searched mine, looking for the lie. He didn't find one. "You don't hate me?" "I hated the name Miller," I admitted, my thumb brushing against the clean edge of his jaw, avoiding the bruises. "But I've been watching you across the fence lines for years. I saw how you handled those horses. I saw how you worked twice as hard as your brothers. I don't hate you, not even a little bit." The rest of the night was spent in a tense, protective silence. I moved Bo to the guest room, but he wouldn't let go of my hand. The trauma of the abandonment was still fresh, a raw wound in his mind. "Stay," he whispered as I tucked the quilt around him. "Please, Colton, I don't want to be alone when the dark comes." I pulled up a chair and sat by the bed. I took his hand, his long, elegant fingers looking so fragile inside my scarred, wide palm. "I'm right here," I said, "and I'm not going anywhere." As he finally drifted into a fitful sleep, I looked out the window. The storm was passing, but a new one was coming. I knew the Millers. They wouldn't be happy that their disgrace was being sheltered by their rival. They'd come for him, not to take him back, but to make sure he stayed silent. I looked back at Bo's sleeping face. He was beautiful, even with the bruises. He was a survivor, and he was under my roof. In Texas, there's an old law of the land. What you find and protect, you claim. My father would call me a traitor. The town would call me a scandal. But as I watched Bo's chest rise and fall in a steady rhythm, I knew I didn't care. He was abandoned by the Millers, but he was claimed by a West. And God help the man who tried to take him back. The morning had been quiet. Too quiet. I'd spent it in the kitchen, watching Bo pick at a plate of eggs. He was wearing one of my old flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up 3 times to fit his smaller wrists. He looked like a ghost haunting a house that finally wanted him there. "They're coming, aren't they?" Bo asked, his voice barely a whisper over the sound of the ceiling fan. I didn't lie to him. "Your father's truck just cleared the ridge. He's got 2 of your brothers with him." Bo's face went white. He dropped his fork, the metal clattering against the ceramic like a gunshot. "Colton, you have to let me go. If they see me here, if they think you're helping me, they'll burn this place down. I've caused enough trouble." I walked around the table and put my hands on his shoulders. I felt him trembling, a fine, sharp vibration of pure terror. "Look at me, Bo. I'm a West. We don't bow and we don't break. You're not trouble. You're a guest under my protection. Now go into the study and lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's over." He grabbed my sleeve, his eyes pleading. "Colton, please." "Go," I growled, the protective alpha in me surging to the surface. He saw the fire in my eyes and nodded, retreating into the back of the house just as the roar of a heavy diesel engine pulled into my gravel driveway. I stepped out onto the porch just as Elias Miller slammed his truck door shut. He was a big man, weathered by the sun and fueled by a narrow, bitter brand of religion. His 2 eldest sons, Wyatt and Travis, stood behind him like statues of malice. "West!" Elias barked, spitting a glob of tobacco juice into my dirt. "I know he's in there. My trackers followed the horse prints right to your gate." I leaned against the porch railing, crossing my arms over my chest. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't have to. My presence alone was a barricade. "You're trespassing, Elias. And last I checked, you told the whole county that boy wasn't yours anymore. You disowned him. You threw him in the mud on my land. That makes him my business, not yours." Elias took a step forward, his face turning a dark, ugly shade of red. "He's a Miller disgrace. I didn't throw him away for you to pick up and coddle. I want him out here, now. I've got a one-way bus ticket to the city for him, and I'm going to make sure he's on it." "He's not going anywhere," I said, my voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a threat that made Wyatt and Travis shift their weight uneasily. "He's beaten, he's exhausted, and he's finally safe. If you wanted to decide his future, you shouldn't have treated him like trash yesterday." "You're protecting a sinner, Colton," Elias screamed, his voice cracking with rage. "You're crossing a line you can't come back from." I stood up straight then, stepping off the porch and into the dirt. I drew a line in the dust with the toe of my boot, right between me and the three of them. "The only line I see is this one," I said, my voice cold and steady. "This is Westland, and on this side of the line, Bo Miller is a man who is respected and protected. If any of you even think about crossing it, you'll find out exactly why my family has held this ridge for 100 years. Now get off my property before I stop being polite." Elias stared at me, his eyes full of a hatred that went back generations. He looked at my house, then back at me, calculating the cost of a fight he knew he couldn't win. I was younger, stronger, and I had nothing to lose. He had a reputation to keep. "You'll regret this, West," he spat. He climbed back into his truck, his sons following suit. They tore out of the driveway, kicking up a wall of dust that hung in the air long after they were gone. I stood there for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wasn't scared of them. I was scared of the look I knew I'd see on Bo's face when I went back inside. I walked into the study and found him huddled in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest. When he saw me, he didn't ask if they were gone. He just looked at my hands, making sure they weren't bloodied. "You stayed," he whispered. I sat on the floor next to him, ignoring the ache in my joints. I reached out and pulled him into my side. He didn't resist. He collapsed against me, his head resting on my shoulder just like it had on the horse. "I told you, Bo," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name yet. "The Millers don't get to hurt you anymore. You were abandoned by them, but you're claimed by me. Do you understand what that means?" He looked up at me, his blue eyes searching mine. The bruises were starting to turn yellow, but the spark of life was coming back. "It means I don't have to run anymore." "That's right," I said, pressing a firm, protective kiss to the top of his head. "You're home, Bo, for as long as you want to be." 2 months had passed since the line was drawn in the dirt. The bruises on Bo's face had faded, leaving behind a man who looked younger, brighter, and stronger than I'd ever seen him. He was out in the corral, working with a skittish chestnut mare that no one else could get near. I leaned against the cedar fence, a piece of hay between my teeth, just watching him. He moved with a grace that made my chest tighten. He didn't just understand horses. He understood what it felt like to be scared and wild, and he knew how to lead them back to peace. "She trusts you," I called out. Bo turned, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. "She just needed to know she wasn't going to be hit for making a mistake, Colton." The words hung in the air, a subtle reminder of the life he'd left behind. He walked over to the fence, wiping the sweat from his brow. "The supply run to town is today, isn't it?" "It is," I said, my voice grounding. "You don't have to go, Bo. I can handle the Miller glares on my own." He shook his head, his blue eyes settling on mine with a new kind of iron. "I'm not a ghost, Colton, and I'm not a secret. If I'm going to live here, I'm going to live here with my head up." I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost knocked the wind out of me. "All right, then. Let's go show them what a West man looks like." Driving into town was like riding into a hornet's nest. As my truck pulled up to the general store, the porch went silent. The gossip stopped mid-breath. And there, standing by the grain scales, was Elias Miller and his sons. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Bo stepped out of the truck, his shoulders back. He was wearing a new pair of boots I'd bought him and a belt buckle with the West brand, a gift I'd given him for his birthday. Elias stepped forward, his eyes full of venom. "You've got a lot of nerve, boy, walking around here like you belong." I stepped around the front of the truck, my large frame shielding Bo's side. I didn't say a word. I just put my hand firmly on the small of his back, a clear public sign of ownership and protection. "He belongs exactly where he is, Elias," I said, my voice carrying across the town square. "He's the best hand I've ever had, and he's a better man than anyone standing on that porch. If you've got a problem with him, you've got a problem with the West Ridge." One of the town elders, a man who had known my father, stepped forward. He looked at Bo, clean, fed, and standing tall, and then at the bitter, angry face of Elias. "Seems to me," the elder said slowly, "that the boy looks a lot more like a man since he left your fence line, Elias. Maybe the problem wasn't the boy. Maybe it was the ranch." A few people nodded. The spell was broken. Elias realized the town wasn't going to back his cruelty anymore. He turned his back and walked away, his sons trailing behind like whipped dogs. That night, back at the ranch, the stars were so bright they looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. We were sitting on the porch swing, the rhythmic creak of the chains the only sound in the Montana night. "I thought I'd feel smaller today," Bo whispered, his hand finding mine in the dark. "But I felt big, for the first time in my life." "That's because you are, Bo," I said, pulling him closer until he was tucked under my arm. "You were abandoned by people who were too small to see your heart. Their loss was my greatest gain." I turned to him, my hand cupping his face. The man I had found in the mud was gone. In his place was the person I wanted to wake up to for the next 50 years. "I'm not just your boss, Bo, and I'm not just your shield. I love you. I've loved you since the moment I picked you up out of that storm." Bo's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a man who had finally found his home. He leaned in, pressing his lips to mine in a kiss that tasted like cedar, rain, and forever. "I love you too, Colton," he breathed against my skin. "Thank you for finding me." "I didn't just find you," I whispered, my voice thick with the Enceladus grit. "I claimed you, and a West never lets go of what's his." As the moon rose over the ridge, the feud was finally over. A new legacy had begun, one built not on hate, but on the strength it takes to love the one person the world told you to hate. They say that blood is thicker than water, but in the Texas dust, I learned that love is stronger than both. Bo Miller didn't just lose a family the day he was abandoned at my gate. He shed a skin that was never meant for him. He traded a life of fear for a life of fire, and I traded a lifetime of hate for a man I'd go to war for. Seeing Bo stand tall on that ridge, no longer the broken boy in the mud, but the man who holds my heart, is the only legacy I ever want to leave behind. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whose name is on the fence. What matters is who is standing beside you when the storm rolls in. If you believe that the family you choose is the one that truly matters, then join our circle. Subscribe to Gay Stories Chronicles so you never miss a moment of these journeys. Your support helps us tell the stories that need to be heard. If Colton and Bo's courage touched you today, please give this video a like. Before you go, I want to ask you something